Have you ever been on a date that turned into a complete disaster? First story. Just had my first date in 5 years. It was a disaster. I, 26M, haven't had much luck on Tinder, until last week. I super liked this girl, Kara, 21F, and to my surprise, we matched. She actually replied to my messages, though she admitted she was a bad texter and would often leave me on read, which honestly wasn't a problem for me. Eventually, I finally worked up the courage to ask if she wanted to meet up. She agreed, yay. Now, I wasn't about to slack on this opportunity. It was my first date in 5 years, so I wanted to do it right. First, I made a list of possible topics to talk about based on what I knew about her. She seemed to be a very active feminist, so I read some Simone de Beauvoir to make sure I wasn't caught off guard if she asked for my opinion on anything related. She was also pursuing an art degree, and I found out there was an exhibit featuring a 70s postmodern artist. I bought 2 tickets and even read up on him so I could give my thoughts if she asked. Finally, she seemed to be really into holistic things like tarot, so I found this quirky coffee place with that kind of vibe where we could meet up before the exhibit. The perfect date plan: meet for coffee, chat, then head to the exhibit. And if I got lucky? Maybe a kiss at the end. I met her at the door, and we went inside. The place was beautifully decorated, so we spent some time admiring the little sculptures and art pieces on the walls. Then, in comes Dave, fake name. Some of these are for sale if you're interested, he says. I'm also doing tarot readings today. Kara's eyes lit up. We should totally get a reading, she said. Sure, sounds interesting, I replied. Big mistake. We sat down, and Dave pulled out the deck, if that's even what it's called, and started shuffling. As he laid out the cards, he began talking about her life choices, her emotions, and personal struggles. I could see it was having an effect on her. She kept gazing into his eyes while he spoke, almost like I wasn't even there. Time passed, and they were still talking, about life, relationships, everything. I was feeling more and more like a third wheel on my own date. So, I tried to cut in. Hey, do you want to head to the exhibit? I think it closes in about an hour. She smiled, looked at Dave, and said, Dude, you would totally love this exhibit. You should come with us. And just like that, she invited tall, handsome Dave to join us. And of course, he agreed. They chatted the whole walk to the exhibit. When we got there, I pretended to take a phone call and told them I had an emergency. She said it was a bummer but didn't seem particularly upset. I went home and cried in the shower. I've never felt so useless in my entire life. This guy just swooped in and stole my date right in front of me, and I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't have high expectations for how the date would end, but, holy hell. Is there any way to avoid this kind of situation in the future? Next story. Last year, I went on a date with a guy I met online. He seemed nice. We'd exchanged messages for about a week before arranging to meet. He was a manager at a construction company, had a house, a car, a dog, an allotment, and his profile said he was in his mid-30s. We decided to meet at a pub halfway between us, and I was genuinely excited. It was, so bad. First of all, he was easily in his mid-50s. I refused to believe he'd been in his 30s at any point in the last decade. And then it got worse. I'm pretty sure he was in a cult. I've dealt with anti-vaxxers before. Fine, you respect my right to get vaccinated, I'll respect your right not to. But this guy? This was a whole new level. He didn't believe in medicine. He proudly told me how his mom, who died of cancer, never got treatment because they didn't believe in it. He said that if he broke a bone, he wouldn't get it fixed, he'd just let it heal naturally. According to him, medicine was interfering with natural selection, and the world was being filled with weaker people because of it. Then came the water thing. He didn't drink tap water because, in his words, it's poisonous. Instead, every 2 weeks, he would drive hundreds of miles with a tank to collect water from a well and bring it home. He even told me I was crazy for using a Brita filter. Could it get worse? Yes. He ended the date by asking to see me again, and then handed me a relationship schedule. According to him, he'd know within 3 months if he wanted to live with me, at which point I'd need to sell my house and move in. Then, within 3 months of living together, he'd know if he wanted to marry me, so I should expect a proposal in about 6 months. We'd need a short engagement, because apparently it's bad for women to have babies after turning 30, and I was already 28. But, of course, babies could only happen after marriage. And if I survived childbirth, he'd obviously want more kids. I told him I didn't want to see him again because of our wildly different beliefs, and I made a run for my car. By the time I'd set up the sat nav, his number was blocked. Thankfully, I've never heard from him again. I also haven't been on a date since. Now, I'm happily single, with 2 dogs. Next story. Years ago, I unknowingly agreed to go on a date with a guy I met in a pub. We were in a group chatting about films when he asked if I'd like to see the new Star Wars movie with us. At the time, I didn't realize that us actually meant just him. I arrived at the cinema, and he was late because, according to him, his stupid dad, who was driving him, didn't leave the house on time. Keep in mind, this guy was in his 20s. During the movie, he ate popcorn in massive fistfuls, chewing with his mouth wide open. And for about 60% of the film, he kept leaning over and whispering, "Very fit you are," in what he must have thought was a seductive Yoda impression. It wasn't funny or charming the first time, and it only got more annoying with every repetition. After the film, I was planning to head straight home, but he asked me for a lift because he couldn't get hold of his dad and didn't have money for a taxi. We lived in the same village, about an 80-minute walk away, so I agreed. My dad had always taught me to make sure people got home safely. When I pulled up outside his parents' house, he suddenly tried to kiss me goodbye, and not a friendly peck either. He went in for a full-on romantic smooch, while I was still in the driver's seat. I managed to dodge him, thankfully. Honestly, he looked like the type to be a slobbery kisser. I thought that was the end of it and went about my life. But a week later, he called to ask me out again. I tried to let him down gently, but he completely lost his temper and slammed the phone down on me. Lesson learned, I never agree to anything now without double-checking who else is going. Next story. My date turned up, and she was nothing like the person in her pictures. Let's just say she was far, far cuddlier. Then she dropped the bombshell: her brothers, their dog, and her mum would be chaperoning our date. And not to the nice restaurant I'd booked, but to Burger King. We turned the corner, and there they were. Her brothers were huge skinheads, and her mum had slick back hair with the kind of face that told you she'd lived a hard life. They also had a massive Rottweiler on a choker chain. I went along with it because, honestly, I was afraid of how my new chaperones were looking at me. Inside Burger King, I was literally pinned against the wall eating my food, wedged in by a massive skinhead who clearly had never heard of personal space, or deodorant. The other brother stood outside, feeding the dog chips while smoking a joint. Apart from the grunts of 3 ravenous people eating like it was their last meal, the table sat in complete silence. When we finished, we headed outside. The mother gave me this sinister smile and asked if I'd like to hop into the back of their van to drive to the next town, so I could meet the rest of the Hills Have Eyes family. After some protesting, and them refusing to take no for an answer, I did the only thing I could think of: I turned and ran. Fast. The brothers and the Rottweiler actually chased me down the high street. I ducked into a Primark and hid in a changing room until it was safe. Needless to say, after nearly being kidnapped, and who knows what else, I tightened up my pre-screening process for dates. A lot. Next story. My actual worst date, the one I will never live down, was when I met a guy through work. We started chatting on Facebook for a while, and we were both 17. We arranged to meet at a local cafe. We ended up sitting upstairs on a sofa, which just so happened to be right next to the only toilet in the place. It was just a hollow core door, and I knew you could hear everything through it. I ordered a herbal tea that clearly didn't agree with me, because just a few minutes after drinking it, I got that unmistakable feeling in my stomach. The one where you know you're about to shit your knickers. I excused myself and went to the toilet. Almost instantly, I started sweating and feeling overheated. My stomach cramped, and I had no choice but to let it all out. What came out of me could have topped Hiroshima. I swear I could hear people in the cafe taking cover from the bombs I was dropping. After I'd finished what felt like emptying my entire digestive system, I had to open the door and immediately face this poor guy, sitting right there, waiting for me. And yes, the smell followed me out. I acted like nothing had happened, and somehow, the date even ended with a kiss. He actually tried to invite me out again, but I was far too mortified to accept. Years later, I saw him on a night out, and I still felt awkward. Next story. The ex who just wouldn't leave. A few months ago, I, 29F, went on a date with this guy, Matt, 31M, who I'd been chatting with on a dating app. He seemed sweet, polite messages, good banter, and he actually suggested a nice Italian restaurant for our first date. When I arrived, he was already there, smiling, standing to greet me, and pulling out my chair. So far, so good. We ordered drinks, started chatting, and honestly, it was going well. He was funny, attentive, and I started thinking, wow, maybe this one's actually promising. We'd been there about 30 minutes when I noticed his eyes dart toward the door. I turned to look, and in walks this woman, tall, gorgeous, and dressed like she's about to walk a runway. She scans the room, locks eyes with Matt, and then starts striding right toward our table. Before I can even process what's happening, she sits down. Not next to him. Not across from him. Right next to me. She leans back in her chair and says, "Well, Matt, I see you've downgraded." I freeze. Matt awkwardly laughs and says, this is Jessica, my ex." Apparently, she just happened to be in the neighborhood and thought she'd say hi. But instead of leaving after a quick hello, she opens the menu and flags down the waiter. She's staying. The rest of the night was pure torture. She spent the entire dinner making jokes about how Matt has terrible taste in women now, telling me embarrassing stories about him, and asking invasive questions about my job, my family, and even my weight. And Matt? He just sat there, nervously chuckling, not defending me once. Every now and then, he'd mutter, "Come on, Jess," but he never actually told her to leave. At one point, she asked the waiter to bring 3 straws so we could all share a drink, since apparently we're in some weird throuple now. By the time dessert menus came around, I'd had enough. I excused myself to the bathroom, paid my part of the bill at the bar, and walked straight out the door. Later that night, Matt texted me. "Sorry about Jess. She can be a little intense. Wanna try again next week?" I never replied. If that's how he handles his ex walking all over a first date, I can't imagine how he'd handle anything serious. Next story. The vanishing wallet. A couple of years ago, I, 27F, matched with this guy, Ryan, 30M, on a dating app. He was charming, funny, and from his profile photos, clearly into nice clothes, good food, and the finer things in life, his words, not mine. After a few days of texting, he asked if I'd like to go out to dinner. But not just anywhere. He said, "I know this amazing upscale restaurant. You'll love it. My treat." Now, I'm usually cautious about first dates, but he seemed confident and kept insisting it was his idea and his treat. So I agreed. When I arrived, the place was gorgeous, soft lighting, white tablecloths, the kind of place where the waiters wear suits and the menu doesn't have prices listed. Ryan was already there, waving me over like we were old friends. From the start, he took charge of ordering. First, a bottle of champagne that I knew had to be pricey. Then oysters, lobster, steak, multiple sides. And he kept telling the waiter, "Oh, and bring us your best." I mostly picked at my food because honestly, it felt like his show, not our date. We were halfway through dessert when he suddenly leaned in and said, "I'm just gonna run to the bathroom. Don't miss me too much." I laughed politely. 5 minutes went by. 10. 15. I checked my phone. No messages. I started getting a bad feeling. After 20 minutes, I asked the waiter if he'd seen Ryan. He gave me this look and said, "Ma'am, your companion left through the side door about 15 minutes ago." That's when the bill arrived. $312.47. I froze. I didn't have that kind of money, not even close. I explained to the manager what happened, but he wasn't interested in my sob story. "Someone's gotta pay," he said. So I did. Not with money, but by spending the rest of the night in the kitchen, scrubbing pots and pans until my hands were raw. The smell of old food and dishwater clung to me the whole way home. The cherry on top. The next day, Ryan texted me. "Had a great time last night, wanna do it again?" I didn't even reply. I just blocked him. That night taught me 2 valuable lessons: never agree to go somewhere you can't afford yourself, and always have an exit strategy.